there who watch this like, oh, we do? Okay. It's interesting. I'm following it online. I usually both of them up.
Good to go. Well, since we had a break a little earlier and Mary, you were talking about that teacher, lives of you and so many other students.
This is all about math.
I had that math teacher, that kind of teacher in 8th grade.
Okay.
And I think about her a lot, and especially when I was
We're back.
thinking of how important that was. And as I go through this kind of report you're reminding me this morning, life-changing teachers is very lucky. So we have a little break with the table of 60 on page 8, where I'm multiplying my estimated spending per existing student by the 33 new students, just over 661,000, a little bit more than that. New spending in, if it had been this current school year, services to the 33 new students, only 313,456 needs to be covered by the local levy. And that's what we're really looking at. And the last table on this page is the effect of the new students on the budget. So this is where we're looking at, in the first year, the pilot payment school district is estimated at just over $391,000. The levy it at 313,000 and a little bit more is less than would be needed to pay for those students in the current school year. And so I estimate that in addition to the 33 that were calculated would be living at the project and enrolling in the schools, in the first year, an additional 8 students would be supported. So it would be a little bit of an ease on the district, having those new tax revenues from the project. Over time, for the school district, it's, in my very conservative estimates, it's about 5 to 7 years into the pilot that the school district costs, which are going up, I estimate about, I think 1 to 1.5% a year, begin to outstrip the increase in the pilot payments, which is the result of 2 things. Well, 3 things. First of all, it's an estimate. 5 to 7 years out, we don't know. What we're trying to do is understand what it looks like. Jonathan's team estimated that rents would in fact increase 3% year over year. This analysis follows a general HFA assumption that rent increased 2%. So right out of the gate, and I did that on purpose because I wanted to see if the project would be feasible with the project at the HFA expectation of a 2%. And they're not saying you can't raise it more than that. I mean, they're controlling that. So that was a deliberate conservative choice, and control, you're right, one of the ways that that shows up is that your school costs do start going up faster than the pilot payments. In reality, the pilot payments, even though they're shown here as an estimate, will depend on the amount of rent collected, which depends on vacancy and the charge per unit. But it's, in order to stop the pilot before it gets into that situation where the students are costing more than the project is generating, you'd be ending a pilot so soon the project wouldn't be feasible. You'd be stopping it at 5 or 7 years based on these numbers. So I can certainly take a look at, if we, on a less formal basis, what would happen if I used a less conservative. Similarly, the effects on the city budget, there's many more people using services because all of the 315 units, not just in those expected to have children in the schools, And looking at that, I made an estimate again, and this is based on the levy rather than the budget because it reflects the other revenues that you're getting and assistance. Divide that over the current city residents. And then estimate, again, as with the schools, not all of the city costs are variable. So I looked through city budgets for a few years and I looked at, governance, capital, and I looked through changes in departments and ultimately estimated for the purposes of this analysis that approximately 50% of budgeted costs are variable and would be increased as a result of having more residents using services. And the other 50% wouldn't change, still going to plow the streets. And you're going to plow South McQuestion, whether this building is there or not, as an example. But now you've got South McQuestion offsetting some of those costs and dividing those among all current city residents to get an estimated per resident cost of about $289. I'm on page 9 for anyone who's following along with the report, and it's in the table 7A, the City of Mount Vernon budget costs, and then the allocation of the levy, an estimate of variable expenses. So the estimated levy cost at $299 variable only for new residents is $203,611 based on the current budget. The 706 new residents is using best justice guidelines for how many people would live in a unit based on its size.
So just as a clarification question, this assumes that if there's an overcrowding situation, say in a house where you have a multi-generational household and they're able to, a couple or a child is able to, or maybe a grandparent who is in a, older home with their kids is able to move into their own apartment with because it's an affordable rent. This doesn't account for any, I'm not saying it should, but just for clarification, this doesn't account for any intercity de-densification, if you will. This assumes that everybody who lives in the building is an addition to the city.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I'm glad that you brought it up. It is understood in economic impact that some of the people who want to move into a building are already here. What you can't capture is where they're coming from or what opportunity to rent this other apartment occurs. You would need a very deep level housing analysis to study those patterns. For income restricted affordable housing, which is in significant demand throughout the county, I always use 100% new residents. It keeps it clean. It doesn't mean that genuinely anticipates that, but it lets me do a couple of things. It lets me say, well, this is the cost of the residents living here on city services. And it also lets me say, okay, you have new residents bringing in their new economic activity. Mm-hmm. And that's the sales tax that is also estimated to be collected. And the sales tax is not part of the comparison of whether the pilot revenues cover the city services. That's extra, but it's a complicated to explain and to do. So I really want to keep it clean. What is the project itself generating? So this makes an assumption, and
just one other thing to just sort of keep in mind. I know, Mayor, at our last meeting, the one thing you said was people who live in the city, they go by these big, beautiful buildings, they see the sign in the front, and when they make a phone call, they learn it's all rented, even before it's opened its doors. I think one thing that's fair from this board to ask, and I understand developer has marketing requirements that they have to ascribe to, but to the extent that marketing can be robust in Mount Vernon, that's something to consider.
Yeah, so we will be subject to the state's rules on the lottery process, which people, is challenging, especially for communities that are making the investment. But,
But the more applications you have from a community,
the higher the rate goes up. And as you know, as folks know, I mean, two of the owners of this project, who are true equity partners in the project, are living in Mount Vernon. I mean, the connection, the commitment to hire local, contract local, and then, market local is felt very deeply and personally on the team.
I mean, and if there are any projects that we give any type of abatements to, we would definitely have them work with our not-for-profits. See if the schools can help push out information, use the faith-based organizations, because that is the problem, and that's what I said a long time ago. In Mount Vernon, since buildings of this type workforce has not been historically built, it was like senior buildings, and that was it. People would see the sign go up on a fence, but if they didn't see the building itself, they wouldn't apply. And then the ribbon cutting comes and everyone's like, how do I get into that view, that building? It looks nice. Well, the applications have already come in. And we find out that we're giving benefits to buildings where we're not getting a good number of Mount Vernon residents, right? And so we know we have an old housing stock. And we know based on building inspections and fires, slumlords and everything else that we're dealing with, that we need to have new housing stock to give our residents other options. And so it's important to have them, but we, like we said, we don't want just everyone that we're taking on a tax. We're giving an incentive and our residents aren't benefiting. So that's, so the marketing for this project and anything that comes before us would have to be very, very robust to make sure that Mount Vernon residents are benefiting.
So, and my focus is about the cost. Out running the benefit. And if we are talking about specific, I guess you said school is around about the 7th year or so that you anticipate without knowing. I mean, there's no clear science, right? Right, there's no, I mean, we understand that there's no clear science because
Right.
we're not looking for that necessarily.
Right.
Right, so, I'm realistic in that way. I think that however, we just have to think about what are creatively, how do we address this issue? So I'm always gonna be concerned about the fact that we are spending out more than what we actually are. Again, to me, an ideal pilot would be that it allows us not to size the abatement that we do, that it doesn't, that provides us not to lose on really, so what we are actually costing in services to provide for this. So, I'm sure, I'm not looking for an answer today. I'm just saying that this is something I need for everybody to get to think about. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I see on my, right, from the comptroller's perspective, right, what it is that, how the city historically has been paying hand over fist for services. Things in which, we just kind of given away the store. And I'm not saying that this case here, I think we got a better kind of, format, formula and all of that too, but yet I still gotta make sure I keep my eye on that, right? Because at the end of the day, I don't want to be trying to figure out cash flow issues because we don't have the right revenue coming in to balance what needs to happen.
Nor do we want to go out 6 and more years without contracts and not being able to provide competitive salaries, to be able to recruit and retain good staff so that the city can provide strong services to the residents who are paying taxes. So all of that is the first concern. And what we've said before, we know that not one project can bear the burden of everything, but everyone has to bear their fair share. So,
Thank you.
I'd add a perspective from communities and projects I've worked with. elsewhere. If these were single family or two family homes, a couple of things would happen, consume more services, and they would have more children. So when you think about the demand upon city services,
Mhm.
The multifamily that's envisioned here consumes fewer services than if you had, a couple of blocks of new single or two family homes. But because it's affordable, the income can be used to pay the real property tax restricted. And as I said, without the assistance, the numbers don't work either, and especially in the early years, they just don't work at all. Yeah, so these are important things to think about. When I'm doing a 30-year projection of services, I have lots of assumption caveats, all of the concerns, because I don't know. I'm assuming that there are no other new businesses, that there's no new investment anywhere in businesses. And your discussion earlier this morning, Director Mack, about trying to understand and create a situation where all of your businesses are paying taxes. When you make progress on that, what's going to happen here is that this residential variable portion of levy would drop from 289, it would drop down. Because right now you have an assessment, the majority of your properties are assessed residential. Your commercial base, as you know, when the value of the commercial base grows, which is what you are working toward, residents pay less of the services overall. And so what I would say, just as an estimate and hearing what you already have in motion, classic, terrific economic development, it's great to hear. 3 years from now, I think these numbers would look different because you're not that far off. And I can get more details about where we're seeing those gaps develop in the out years.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think where we go from here is things that maybe Victoria should consider in terms of providing an update for the board, and certainly work with the applicant towards that end. And you have another meeting in November. We can provide an update at that point in time. And then the next step would be scheduling the public hearing, which hopefully we can do right after Thanksgiving. And then from there, the board can consider a final during December or early January. That's just, just to give everybody a sense of where we're going.
Does the public hearing have to happen at a regular scheduled meeting, or it's a
No,
separate schedule?
we do it separately. And just given the calendar, it's probably best to do it, just the week right after Thanksgiving, and just give Victoria enough time that we can present the numbers to the board.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is one of the best parts about what I do, actually getting out of the numbers, hearing your concerns and making.
And like I said, this is new for us because we haven't, been at this point with any project yet in the time that we've been here. And secondly, it's a process that hasn't happened in the past. I mean, there are market rate projects out there who got incredible abatements. And this process has not been handled well in the past to the detriment of the city. So that's why we are asking lots of questions and making sure that we do this right.
And just for the record, Mayor, in the lead up to this, the cost benefit analysis has been on the IDA website for better part of, easily, I think Thursday of last week. So in the lead up to today's meeting, it was publicly provided and will remain publicly provided for everyone to review.
Thank you.
questions received about it.
Oh, there will be.
Yeah,
I mean, there's
Definitely.
lots of comments. You know, like you said, I went on social media.
So they can use, direct them to send their, so on the IDA webpage is an email address for where they should direct their questions. We really should have a more formal receipt of questions and concerns.
And that was happening also with the public hearing and with the public,
that.
I mean, we're not even at that point, this is the presentation. And so there will be a public hearing, there will be a public comment period, and that's when all of that will, you know, that's when all of that will take place. Okay, thank you.
thank you. I'll turn things over to my colleague Julie to present the resolution, if that's okay. Yeah,
Thank you.
Julie, can you present the resolution?
I can do that, yes. So we only have one resolution this month, and that's payment of invoices.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Julie, for your patience.
So the invoices that we have payment request is the Board of Water Supply, and that's for the healthcare premium. The City of Mount Vernon Board of Water Supply also for the 219 South Fourth Avenue property. Invoice from Oxman Law Group for August legal services. Invoice from Harris Beach for August legal services. And then the workers' compensation premium payable to New York State Insurance Fund. So we would need a motion to adopt the resolution. Second. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? And the motion is carried. Other items on the agenda, report of agency council, I think we went through quite a bit today, so no other reports to be given. The next scheduled meeting would be November 9th, and that's where we're anticipating the draft audit report to be presented.
Thank you.
Beyond that, I believe we can adjourn.
Second. Meeting is a roll call or all in favor? Meeting adjourned at 11:25 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.